Good afternoon. I'm the Italian ambassador to Zambia. My name is Antonino Maggiore, and I'm very glad to welcome you all to this webinar. I'm particularly happy to see a very good participation in presence in the room here at the Zambia Italian Cultural Center. There are many students, and this makes me very happy. And not only students, and that makes me happy even more. There are online, I think, as I can see, other participants, and I think, and I hope that other will get online while we go on with our event. I would like to start by welcoming our dear friend, Professor Costantino D'Orazio. Good afternoon, Costantino. Costantino has become a very good friend of Zambia and of the Zambian people, because he has been with us already for some other cultural events, and now when I go around in Lusaka and there are gatherings and people ask me, when are you going to do the next event with Costantino? And I said, look, my friends, we have an event coming up, but we will have another in December. But you have to also understand that Costantino is a very busy person, because as a cultural expert, he cannot devote his time only to Zambia, because I want to underline that Costantino has just achieved a very important success with a beautiful exhibition in Rome called Back to Nature. It's an exhibition organized in a fantastic park in the center of Rome, Villa Borghese, and I invite you all to have a look online, follow some of the TVs covering of this beautiful exhibition. Today, Costantino will be with us and entertain us on a beautiful subject, which is the secrets of the Sistine Chapel of Michelangelo. It will be a very interesting conversation with Costantino, because Michelangelo made his masterpiece in the Sistine Chapel, where he worked twice. He did the ceiling, and after the masterpiece of the Universal Judgment. Costantino will take us by hands and will take us around the Sistine Chapel to discover the secrets that Michelangelo put around in the Sistine Chapel. Of course, I believe that going in person to visit the Sistine Chapel in Rome is one lifetime thing to do, absolutely. But today, I'm sure that we can provide a glimpse, a very good glimpse and insight of this masterpiece, so that everybody can learn about this masterpiece, what are the messages that Michelangelo wanted to share with the people around him at that time, but also with us today, because this is the magic of art, that art remains beyond the artist and beyond time, because we, as Italy, in the specific case the Vatican, let's say, so it's another state, but it's in Rome, so it's also Italy, we have to maintain and preserve this beauty so that we can still share with generations and generations, so that the story that Michelangelo wanted to share with us is available to all of us. The Sistine Chapel as a masterpiece is another example of the beauty and the beauty that artists can share with us. And this beauty will reach us today, and I think will be a very important support for us in our time. That is a difficult time, but as always, crises bring also opportunities, because it is also thanks to this very difficult period that we came up with the idea of organizing these webinars, these digital events, so that people could already experience art and culture together. I will conclude by saying that I'm very happy as ambassador of Italy, as team of the embassy in Zambia. I'm very happy that we are organizing these cultural events, because culture is very important to all of us. Thanks to Costantino, we had a beautiful experience about Leonardo da Vinci, about Michelangelo today. We will talk about Raffaello in December, as I was saying. And this will be a cycle of webinar. Also, I would like to remember the one that was about African and Italian art that we hosted in July. All these webinars are available on our website and can be seen also afterwards. So this is also a very important outcome, because everybody can witness these contributions, not only today, but also when they have time to be with us. We meet these artists, these genius artists that I mentioned, Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Raffaello, the artists, the African artists that we met in the previous conference. And I think this is an important value to all of us, because all these artists can show to us that it is possible in a lifetime, in our life, to share with other people our feelings, our experiences, the message that we want to share with other people. And this is very important because it's important. It's a message for all of us. All of us, we can share our message in our life with the other, exactly as these artists did. Thank you very much. I wish you all a very good discussion with Costantino. Professor D'Orazio, thank you very much. I wish you all a very good webinar.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Thank you to the Zambian Italian Cultural Institute to host this webinar. Thank you to the staff of both the Zambian Italian Cultural Institute and the Embassy for organizing this event. So today I've been asked to literally introduce you into the Sistine Chapel, but we will focus mainly on the intervention of Michelangelo Buonarroti inside this wonderful place. As the ambassador already said, Michelangelo had the chance to work 2 times in his life into very different moments of his life inside this church. And we will go and see and check both of his interventions. So my lecture will last around an hour, and we're going to have later on, right after, time for questions and answers, Q&A time. So please take note of all the questions that you might have while I'm talking, because I will be glad to answer them. For those that are connected, you will be able to pose questions with the chat system or the Q&A system, which is down below your screen. You can eventually write your questions even during the lecture. I will answer them all at the end. So I'm going to share my screen now. I'm sure all of you are used to Zoom lectures and meetings, because before getting into the Sistine Chapel, I would like to introduce you to the environment and to the situation, to the facts, the art facts that were going on while Michelangelo was appointed. When Michelangelo was appointed, I want to put my time so that, okay, was appointed to paint the walls of the Sistine Chapel. So first of all, this is one of the portraits that we have, that we received from the century which Michelangelo lived in. And I want to share with you this portrait of Michelangelo, because this portrait has got a detail that tells a lot about Michelangelo's talent and Michelangelo's identity as an artist. He was born in 1475, so he was about 55, 60 in this image when a collaborator of his, Jacopino del Conte, made this portrait. Well, Michelangelo decided to show up, to pose in front of Jacopino in a very specific pose, not just his face, where you can see that it's at 55, it was actually looking a bit older, because he really worked every single day of his life since he was 10, and he never stopped working. But on top of the fatigue of the effort he put on into his art, there is another detail that Michelangelo wanted to stress and show in this detail, is his hand. Look at his hand down below the right of your screen. This is a hand that it's not relaxed. Well, it's a relaxed hand of somebody that kept on using this hand, holding tight a hammer. And the arthrosis that Michelangelo had while was still young, at 50, around 50, a disease that he was also talking and writing about in his letter, basically made his hand always ready to keep the hammer. So he basically, the art changed his body. What art? Not painting, but sculpting. So Michelangelo also defined himself a sculptor much more often than a painter. As a matter of fact, he was the author of many sculptures that became masterpieces, from the Pietà to the David or the Moses or the slaves that you will see, I will show you later. He always spent, he spent much more time of his life working on marble than using a brush on a canvas or on a piece of wood or on a wall. But ironically, Michelangelo today is much more famous for a painting, for the frescoes that he made in the Sistine Chapel. It's really an unpredictable phenomenon that occurred to his life and to his reputation. He lived 89 years, spending around, let's say, if we take off the first 10 years, 70 years in sculpting, just 9 in painting. But nevertheless, we still consider him a great painter. And I will show you how much sculpture was important for him. And he recalled how much he recalled sculpture while he was creating his paintings. The relationship between Michelangelo, who was born in Florence, and Rome didn't start with the Sistine Chapel, but it started with the Pietà. When Michelangelo was around 23, he had this commission. He was appointed to sculpt this beautiful piece of marble with a Virgin Mary and Jesus dead on her lap. A piece that Michelangelo created with an extreme effort in order to make the hard and cold marble look soft and also alive in the flesh of Jesus and the face of the Virgin Mary. A piece that he made while he was almost unknown. And that's why, as you can see on the belt of the Virgin Mary, he carved his signature. It's the only piece that he ever signed, because he wanted to be clear, to make clear that he was the author of this piece. And he wanted to affirm his name as an artist, because he was at the very beginning of his career. Now, right after this piece, the fortune of Michelangelo was not so good in Rome, and he had to go back to Florence, where he made many masterpieces like the David. But what did it happen in Rome while Michelangelo was in Florence? Well, in 1503, the Pope, the new Pope, Julius II, decided to tear down this building. This is how St. Peter's Basilica looked before the one that we have today. So this is the historical St. Peter's, the one that Emperor Constantine built up in 313, and it lasted for 1200 years. Well, at the very beginning of the 1500s, this church was a very neglected place. It was almost a ruin. There were animals preserved inside the church. There was no control at all, and most of the frescoes and the pieces that have been decorating this place for centuries was almost over, disappeared, ruined. Well, so Julius II decided that it was much more convenient to tear down the church and build a new one. But to build this new church, I mean, they needed to work over 120 years. During the government of Julius II, they started from the back. They started building from behind the dome. The dome was the last piece to set on the church, and also the dome was designed by Michelangelo. But almost 50 years before, in 1504, the building sites of the new St. Peter's started from the apse, from behind the altar. At that point, Michelangelo was called back to Rome by Pope Julius II. He was not called to paint something inside St. Peter's Basilica, but he was called to create a huge monument, a huge sculpture, the tomb of Pope Julius II. Of course, the Pope was still alive, but he was already thinking about his burial place. The architect that was working on the project of St. Peter's Basilica was this guy here, Donato Bramante. He was from Urbino, east of Italy, central east of Italy. He was a great architect who was a master of the Renaissance architecture, recalling all the shapes, the details, the proportions of ancient architecture, the one designed and conceived by the ancient Roman architects. So he was taking back to life the domes, the columns, the the proportions of ancient architecture. So he was working on the project of St. Peter's Basilica, working from the back of the main altar. Michelangelo was called to create this piece. Well, I have to say, this is just a little detail of this piece, because you have to think that the whole burial monument of Julius II, it's been calculated that it was around 100 square meters large. So Michelangelo was called back to Florence to create a huge monument that he had decided to set right behind the altar. So, well, the place that Donato Bramante had already created. For this piece, Michelangelo had sculpted some of the sculptures that you can see here. We call them the slaves, because all of these bodies are somehow tight and somehow are about to wake up or to move and take a move out of the marble they have been sculpted in. These are a great proof of the idea, the philosophical idea that Michelangelo had about sculpting. For him, sculpture was just an action that had to take the image out of a piece of marble. Michelangelo was saying, when I see a block of marble, and he was picking the pieces of marble one by one, going directly to the caves. He was saying, when I see a piece of marble, a block of marble, I can already see the figure which is inside. And the only job a sculptor has to do is just to take this sculpture out, to take this image out. That's why the image that you have on the right-hand side, it's almost unfinished, because Michelangelo left it unfinished in order to give you the idea of an image of a body that is going back to life, or that is having birth, thanks to the hand of a sculptor. Most probably, he would have not completed that piece. So Michelangelo is working on this huge monument. He's already sculpting, has already ordered the marble, and get in touch with Donato Bramante in order to arrange the location, in order to say, just to take the measure, you know, a very practical agreement. I am building this. This is going to be the scale. This is going to be the size. I need space to host this piece of marble, this huge monument. This is how it looked more or less, okay? Well, the altar that you can see in the middle will be made 100 years later. So in the space right behind the altar that you see at the bottom of the image, this is where Michelangelo was thinking of setting this monument. But as a matter of fact, the available space was not enough for Michelangelo's monument. So he started to say to Bramante that he had to change his project, because he would need more space for his own piece. And of course, Donato Bramante never, ever accepted this request by Michelangelo. He was so focused on the proportions of his job, of his work, of his project, that would have never changed it. So he started to feel kind of a bad feeling against Michelangelo. They started to become rival. They started to become one, to work one against the other. And they started to talk badly, to say bad things, one about the other, to Pope Julius II, with whom they both could boast a direct relationship. Well, at this point, the one that had a better result was Donato Bramante. As a matter of fact, Donato Bramante persuaded Julius II, who had a quite changing, a fast changing mind and character, he persuaded the Pope to change his mind and abandon the need, the urgency of a monument, of a funeral monument. So basically, Michelangelo started to see that the Pope Julius II would not give attention anymore to him and to his project. He was asking for more marble. He was asking for more money to keep on working, to go on with the job of the funeral monument. But Julius II was not even receiving Michelangelo anymore. So after a few times in which the request of a meeting by Michelangelo didn't get any answer from the Pope, Michelangelo left Rome. He left Rome again. This time he left Rome again having a very bad feeling and saying very bad things to the Pope. He left Rome one night and didn't even listen to the messengers that the Pope immediately sent to recall Michelangelo back. Halfway from Rome to Florence, Michelangelo was sleeping in a locanda, in a hotel, and these guys reached him, but he didn't want to go back because he was so upset with the Pope. But Donato Bramante, of course, had his first victory. Well, years passes. So this is around 1504, 1505, okay? Michelangelo goes back to Florence. He's got the chance to make the David. But what happens in Rome? Well, the building site of St. Peter's Basilica goes on. But at the same point, Julius II, who had a great will to leave his mark on Rome, on Italy, and within the Vatican walls, starts to think that he should also work inside this building. This is a very rare, because nobody sees it from outside, a very rare image of the Sistine Chapel. This is how it looks from outside. Well, as you can see from the caption, the Sistine Chapel is called Sistine Chapel and not 16. Sometimes I've seen, when I was a guide in Rome, was working as a guide in Rome, I received some tourists that would say, we want to see the 16 Chapel. And they say, why was it called 16? What does the number 16 deal with this place? Not 16. Sistine, because it comes from Pope Sixtus IV. Pope Sixtus IV della Rovere, that wanted in the 1480s to build a new church within the walls of the Vatican City, that what would have been the private chapel of the Pope. And it's still today like this. No other priest can celebrate a service or any other celebration but the Pope. So it is his own personal chapel, just like all the pieces preserved in the Vatican museums. They are a private collection because they all belong to the Pope. Well, Sixtus IV built this chapel, giving the task to an architect called Baccio Pontelli, who was more used to build castles than churches. And that's why, if you look down around, right below the roof of the Sistine Chapel, there is a kind of path with windows that goes all around the Sistine Chapel, as if it is a castle. It is the path for the soldiers that eventually would control the security of the Sistine Chapel. But anyway, this was happening in the second half of the 1400s. How did it look, the Sistine Chapel, right after the commissions of Pope Sixtus IV? Like this. We don't have photos, of course. Photography was invented in the 1800s, but this is how it looked. So as you can see, the walls, the lateral walls were painted by a bunch of magnificent painter coming from Florence. They came from Florence, and their names were Sandro Botticelli, Pier Perugino, Luca Signorelli. they painted on the walls of the Sistine Chapel, on the two sides, episodes of the life of Jesus and episodes of the life of Moses, recalling a project, an iconography that was quite common in the medieval churches, where the artist and the church wanted to underline the fact that the mission of Jesus on earth was linked and connected to the mission of Moses on earth. The first alliance with God, that God signed with human beings, was signed by Moses. The new alliance was signed by Jesus. So with a very specific order, episodes of the life of Jesus, like the one you see below, it's the delivery of the keys of heaven to St. Peter by Perugino, or Moses that goes back to the Hebrew population, the Israeli population, and destroys the idols that had been built, they built while he was on the Mount Sinai. But anyway, you have to think that this artist, coming from a generation that had been educated, that had worked in the 1400s, painted these walls that are still there with scenes that recalls the style, the classical style of the early Renaissance. And you will have the direct feeling of how much the intervention of Michelangelo set a step forward, further, okay? Set the style and the basically it's a jump of generation with Michelangelo, literally, because he was born 5 years before these paintings, but it's also a jump in style and in the arts. So basically, Michelangelo saw the walls already painted. Sorry, Julius II had the walls already painted, and the ceiling, as you can see, was painted as a starry ceiling, as a starry sky, by an artist called Pier Matteo d'Amelia, not very known today. So at a certain point, Julius II decided that he wanted, since Sixtus IV was his uncle, same family, he considered this chapel as a family chapel, della Rovere, and he decided that it was time to set his mark inside this church. So he decided to have a chat, to have a meeting with the main artists that were working for him at that time in Rome, in order to decide who's gonna be the one to paint the vault of the Sistine Chapel. So we know about the dinner. It might look like a kind of a gossip, but I mean, it's coming from the documents. One of the members, one of those that joined this dinner, told how it went. In this dinner, Pope Julius II, all of a sudden, said to these people that were like Giuliano da Sangallo from Florence, or Donato Bramante, that were there both on this dinner. He said, you know what, guys? I want to find somebody to paint the vault of the Sistine Chapel. Well, all of a sudden, absolutely unpredictably, Donato Bramante, that already knew that the Pope Julius II kept on having kind of an interest on Michelangelo, that somehow knew that Julius II wanted to involve Michelangelo again, took out of the hat, as we say in Italian, the name of Michelangelo, saying to Julius II, you know what? Michelangelo Buonarroti could be a good name for this job. And you may think that it would be quite weird, Donato Bramante, that had fought so much with Michelangelo, would propose his name for this painting. Well, you know, you can understand why listening to the answer of Giuliano da Sangallo. Giuliano da Sangallo was from Florence. And at that time, artists were really backing and supporting themselves, one the other, following their original place, or they were creating groups. And of course, they were supporting them. In the next lecture we're going to have, I will tell you about the fact that Donato Bramante invited Raphael to Rome. Both Donato Bramante and Raphael were from Urbino, okay? So thinking of their original place, they were supporting each other. Well, why Donato Bramante was asking, was proposing Michelangelo? Giuliano della Rovere immediately said, no, Michelangelo is not a good name, because he never, ever made an affresco. Donato Bramante knew that. Donato Bramante wanted Michelangelo to fail, wanted Michelangelo to be so ambitious that he would accept this task and fail by doing that. And as a matter of fact, Michelangelo didn't accept easily this job. Julius II had to insist, and he had to offer such an enormous amount of money to paint the ceiling. More than 3,000 scudi, which would be an amount of money to buy a little palace in Rome, just to make this ceiling, which actually is more than 500 square meters, so it was not small at all. But since Michelangelo was quite interested in money, if you have time, I'm going to tell you about his interest in money at the end of this lecture. He accepted this job. So he came back to Rome. This time, he didn't come alone. He came with a group, with a bunch of colleagues, because of course the endeavor was really, really huge, and he knew he needed other hands, help to make it. So they started to work inside the Sistine Chapel, and they immediately built a scaffolding more or less like this. This is actually a scaffolding made in the 1800s for a restoration, but they made it somehow following the project that Michelangelo designed for his scaffolding. So they went up the scaffolding and started to work on that ceiling. Now, there's a funny story. They started to make this fresco, but during, day by day, they started to see that the color, the pigments, were not drying up. You know why fresco is called fresco? Fresco in Italian means fresh. When you refer it to painting, it means that the surface of the wall that you have to paint needs to be wet while you put the color on. So basically, an artist dealing with a fresco, he used to prepare one section of the wall, the section that he knew he could paint in one day, because he needed it to be fresh, wet, while he put the colors, so while he basically creates the figures. It means that the day after, he would paint, prepare with a wet background another section of the wall and paint it over again. And then the day after and the day after. It means that we know how many days any fresco is made out. How many days it lasted to make any fresco, because we can calculate the days. We know day by day what the painter made. And of course, after one day, the section painted the day before should be dry. But this fresco in the Sistine Chapel was not drying up. It was taking too many days, too much time. So something was not going well. So at a certain point, Michelangelo, that couldn't find, neither him nor his collaborators, find a solution for this problem. Because day by day, the color was also ruined, starting to get ruined. So he calls Giuliano da Sangallo, who was an architect, but also from Florence. who was part of the party of Michelangelo, you know. So Giuliano Sangallo climbs up the scaffolding and explains the problem. Well, there was a very, very simple problem. They were all from Florence, and they were making fresco using a kind of powder that was coming from marble, from Tuscan marble. But the problem was that this Tuscan marble, with the humidity of Rome, was not drying up fast enough. So Giuliano Sangallo said, you don't have to use the powder of the marble from Tuscany, the one you are used with, but you have to use travertine, the limestone of Rome, the ancient limestone of Rome. So grind it out, grind it down, and use it to make the colors. You will see that it absorbs the water so much more that it will dry up quite faster. And this is what happened. So Michelangelo had to face, after a few days, such a big practical problem that only a local artist had the solution. So you know how he reacted? He reacted by saying to all the collaborators to go back home. He didn't want anybody else around him. And he started from that moment to paint the vault of the Sistine Chapel all alone for 4 years, every single day inside this chapel, on top of that scaffolding, like this. This is a drawing he made of himself on a paper with a letter in which he's complaining for the fatigue, for the effort, for all the problems he was starting to have with his body, because he was standing day and days, and he had problems in his neck. He had problem with his eyes. He ruined his sight because the color was melting down his hand and going on his face and on his eyes. But yet, he didn't stop. Yet, he continued to paint and work every single day for 5 years without allowing anybody inside the Sistine Chapel on that scaffolding. He was so proud. He was so secure. He was so difficult, and a difficult character. He didn't like to have a crowd around him. He didn't have so many friends. He's got a lot of enemies. He had a lot of enemies. And that's why both the masterpiece in the Sistine Chapel and then the Final Judgment were criticized a lot at that time. Anyway, after a few months, he asked another architect to build kind of a chair and then kind of a bed that he allowed him to lay down while painting. So you don't have, when you enter the Sistine Chapel, or you see the images I'm going to show you in a minute, you don't have to just appreciate them because they're beautiful. They are a work, a job that ruined the physique, the body of a man. But he is also a great man that, submitted himself to this endeavor, huge endeavor. So it's both the drama that he lived and the wonder of the images that created this. Now, there are many, many meanings. Some of the meanings that you would listen about, you would hear about, I have to say, are fake interpretations. We're lucky because we've got over 100 letters written by Michelangelo. I've got them in somewhere in a book. But anyway, you have so many documents, so many words that he wrote, that we don't need to go too far away to find the meaning of this vault. First of all, if you look at this image, you can see that there are what we call sails, these triangles on the two sides, okay? Triangles on those two sides that host the old fathers, okay? Let me see if I can, hold on. I want here, maybe it's this. Yes, it should be this. Let's see. you should see my mouse, okay? So here, here you have the fathers, the old fathers, okay? Here, I hope you see the arrows. The public that is sitting in the room, can you say yes or no with your head? Can you see the arrows, the blue arrows? Not really. Anyway, then there is in the center, there is the, sorry, in the triangles you have the old fathers. Then alternated with the triangles, you have sibyls and prophets. You will see them in details in a few minutes. Sibyls and prophets were traditionally those that announce the birth and the arrival of the Messiah, so Jesus, basically, okay? And you have to think that prophets announce the birth of Jesus in the Bible. Sibyls were not in the Bible, but were part of the pagan religion, but still they announced the arrival of Jesus, okay? So it was also a way to link pagan culture and Christian culture. Then in the center, you have episodes of the Genesis, of the first book of the Bible. So you have to think that the entrance of the Sistine Chapel is from the top. Okay, top of the image is where the entrance is. Bottom of the image is where the main altar is. So if you enter, you would read the story of the Genesis backwards, starting from Noah and the universal flood, and then the original scene, the creation of Eve, the creation of Adam, and then the creation of the world. Okay, so we're going time-wise backwards. Michelangelo, as you can see from the red arrows, in the first phase started to paint the image that you can see on the top. And in the second phase, he painted the one below, okay? Why am I underlining this? Because he painted the first phase and, hold on, and the second phase in a completely different ways. Just let me close. Sorry, yeah? Okay. In a completely different way. Let's start from the first phase, okay? From the top. Okay, just give me 1 second because I want to remove the blue arrows that I set there, okay? Just 1 second. No, clear, like this. Clear all drawings. Here we are. Okay, so let's start from the first phase, okay? So from the histories, the scenes dedicated to Noah. Noah is the one that was picked, chosen by by God, by the Lord, to save the people of earth from the universal flood, people and animals. So this is the universal flood. Look at the amount of figures that Michelangelo painted, and also the drama of these bodies that are trying to save themselves, and at the bottom, the Ark of Noah. Then you have the sacrifice of Noah, the one that he made at the end of the universal flood, thanking God for saving the animals and his family, and the drunkenness of Noah. At a certain point, Noah thought that God had forgotten about his promises. He got drunk, and his sons saw him and are about to cover him with a cloth. Now, if you look at these figures, you may see them closely well, so you understand what's going on over here, okay? But after painting these three scenes, Michelangelo removed the scaffolding that you saw before and moved it to another section of the wall, of the ceiling, in order to continue his job. In that moment, For the first time, he saw these three scenes from the floor, from over 15 meters far away. And as you can see, even here, you hardly understand what are the figures painted in the upper part of image. Now that you know about the details, you can recognize. But before, and even from here, you hardly see all the figures of the universal flood. While, if you look a little bit lower, you can see well, for example, the creation of Adam. The very famous creation of Adam, it's almost at the center. You detect, you see, you understand the figures there, but the one of the universal flood, no way. So Michelangelo understood that he had wasted a lot of time painting so many figures that would have been hard to distinguish from far below. So he changes completely his style. He starts painting much larger figures, monumental figures, I may say, with much larger and faster brush strokes. So basically, he changed his styles ongoing. He changed his technique for a practical reason, because he wanted to make figures that were distinguishable from below. And thanks to this, he basically creates the icons that still make famous the Sistine Chapel. This is on the left-hand side of the screen, the original scene. Adam and Eve are taking the apple gave by the devil that turned himself into a snake. And as it was quite common, the snake was a woman. The devil had the features of a woman. I'm sorry for all the women that are attending this lecture, but this is how it was told at that time. Now on the right-hand side, the consequences, punishment, banishment of Adam and Eve from Eden. Then the creation of Adam, the real icon. Well, the effort that Michelangelo had to put in creating these big figures allowed him to make quite, how do you say, strong images without using too many details. Adam is created in flesh, but also in soul. The fingers that are not touching, they say, they really represent how God that blew on on Adam, giving him the soul, how much Lord made a spiritual creation of the soul. And Michelangelo made a great choice. Maybe you've already heard about this interpretation, but here I'm really going to show you how much Michelangelo thought of the idea that the creation of the soul of the human being, of the first human being, was a matter of spirit, was a matter of idea, was a matter of mind. Because the piece of fabric that goes around the Lord and the angels that support him is a perfect section of a human brain. You see it below. And even look at the legs and the feet. They really recall the connection between the brain and our spine. Michelangelo knew human anatomy quite well. He had worked while he was very young dissecting human bodies in Florence. So he knew how a brain was. Anatomy was part of the education of any artist at that age. Or Michelangelo had the chance for a few months while he was around 16, 17 in Florence to really dissect bodies. So he knew what he was doing. And this is the creation of the mind. So how much Michelangelo was devoted to religion. It was a very, very rational way of thinking of the creation. It's not just the spirit, but it's more a question of the mind. He was a real intellectual whenever he was approaching the arts. In the Punishment and the original scene, there is another very interesting detail that allows us to understand how much the art of Michelangelo grew during this experience. Because look at how much the bodies and the expressions of Adam and Eve change before the original scene and after the original scene. Before, they are fantastic bodies, perfectly designed, alive, young, in perfect health. Right after the original scene, they look old. They look ugly. Look at the face of Eve. Look at the difference. The Eve before and the Eve that is not innocent anymore. Even the colors are much whiter, are bloodless. Because Michelangelo gives to the images, to the task to share emotions. And you have a clear idea of how much he worked on emotions already working on the vault. And you will see how much he improved this way of communicating with the arts in the universal judgment. Now, another secret that has not been really communicated and shared with those that are not scholars is that, well, today we love and we think that the creation of Adam that I showed you before is the real masterpiece, the real icon of the Sistine Chapel. But in the 1500s, it was not like that. I pointed out these four figures on the four corners of each singular scene of the Sistine Chapel, because the nudes that Michelangelo set, literally he set them on the four corners of every single scene. These nudes were the images that became immediately famous. When I say immediately famous, is that I mean that many artists from all over Europe, right after the unveiling of the vault of the Sistine Chapel, started to come to Rome in a pilgrimage to go inside the vault and copy not the creation of Adam, but the nudes. The nudes became a model. These bodies that are sitting on little podiums, but they turn themselves. They have positions that no artist, any artist have created before. Michelangelo made something so new that these nudes, you can find similar nudes standing or sitting basically on any wall painted in the 1500s. It is the so-called mannerism. So copying the manner of Michelangelo would mean to create nude bodies, naked bodies that would look strong, like sculptures, but also moving, just like these nudes. And there is one detail in this nude, again, that became even more a model. It's the belly. Look at how the belly is bent. You know where Michelangelo took this position of the belly, this iconography of the belly? From this sculpture. This sculpture is still preserved in the Vatican Museums. We call it the torso of the Belvedere. Belvedere, Bellevue, is the name of the villa that was turned by Julius II into an archaeological museum, starting from this piece of marble. It's a beautiful story. I don't have the time to tell it all, but in 1506, this piece came out of the earth, of the ground in Rome. the rumors, the news about this run quickly all around Rome, and it arrived to the ears of Pope Julius II. He sends Michelangelo to see this piece, to see, is it worth buying this piece, set it into my collection? Michelangelo, yes, of course, Pope, of course, take it, buy it immediately, and please do not touch it. When I mean touch it, I refer to the fact that the collectors in the 1500s, when they happened to find and to buy a fragment of an ancient marble, they would immediately restore it by completing it with the missing part. So in this case, they would have added arms, legs, head, but this didn't happen to this piece because Michelangelo prevented the Pope to touch this piece. It was the exact proof of what he was thinking about sculpting. This fragment gave to Michelangelo the idea that the body was having birth from the piece of marble on his own. So that's why it is the only fragment still preserved in the Vatican collections. And the belly was imitated by Michelangelo and then by many, many, many other artists after him. So you see, sometimes what you consider is a masterpiece, it's not. I mean, it's not the main part of a piece. This that maybe most of you have never noticed, were instead considered the absolute masterpiece by the artists of that age. Then the Sibyls and the prophets are sitting in the little triangles I showed you before. And what were they amazing for? Well, first of all, their position. Their position is so alive. They inhabit the space in such a new way than the other scenes that you saw before on the walls. They really occupy the space in their movement. Now they turn, they lean out. They have the expressions that are really as if Michelangelo is speaking a moment and isolating a moment of their life. Look at this, the Sibyl from Libya, almost taking the book from behind and moving it in front to write it on. It's really, look at these details. I always love to show these details because you really have you can really understand the brushstrokes. See this brushstroke of Michelangelo that worked close to the ceiling, but of course already knowing that the image had to be seen from quite far away. Now, I promised the ambassador also to share with you some of the stories of the most interesting details of the restoration. Well, the Sistine Chapel has been restored many times in the centuries, but in the past, restoring would mean add ingredients, add varnishes, add enamels, add not colors, but surfaces that they thought they would protect the figure. But as a matter of fact, after 4 centuries of restoration, this is the result in the left part of your screen that they reached. Colors had disappeared. And it was basically a shadow of the actual Sistine Chapel. After the restoration, the one on the Sistine Chapel happened in the early 1980s. This was the result. Let's get into some of the details. This was the scaffolding built by the restorer to restore the Sistine Chapel. And you know how they managed to create this scaffolding? They used the same holes that Michelangelo had used for his scaffolding almost 500 years before. The holes were still there on top of the ceiling, and they used the same. Of course, this time they didn't need a ladder, they used an elevator. And this is how it looked, the laboratory, no? So they were working, photographing, analyzing, but the actual restoration was made by this guy, Gianluigi Colalucci, with that little sponge. So the work on the Sistine Chapel was not so difficult, I may say. I will show you later on the faces of this restoration while they made it on the Universal Judgment. But it was a very, very delicate work, just in order to remove what had been added in the centuries, okay? With these little sponges, Professor Gianluigi Colalucci, take out the actual colors painted by Michelangelo. Look at that. Before on the left-hand side and after on the right-hand side. Before at the top and after below. Look at how much the colors came out. You know what? Gianluigi Colalucci suffered the same destiny of Michelangelo. Michelangelo was really criticized because they didn't understand immediately how strong was this work. Of course, the artist understood, but not the cardinals, not those that were linked to the traditional painting. And Gianluigi Colalucci was accused to had repainted the Sistine Chapel. Of course, because those colors were not predictable, but those were the original ones. And you know what? The other critics he received was about something that he took off. So he not only let the colors came out again, but sometimes he also removed some details. Look at this comparison. Can you see the eyes? Before the restoration, we had the irids, the black eyes. After the restoration, no eyes, no more eyes. And you know why? Because Gianluigi Colalucci was sure that Michelangelo had only painted fresco. The eyes, in this case, had been painted after the fresco with a dry painting. So they've been added when the wall was already dried up, adding details. So he said, whatever has been painted with a dry painting does not belong to Michelangelo, so I'm going to remove it. Big choice, eh? Big decision, but of course, documented one. After Michelangelo spent 4 years to paint all alone the vault of the Sistine Chapel. Then he went back to Rome, and he basically came back in the 30s. So he painted from 1508 till 1512. Okay. Then in 1527, Rome suffered a huge, terrible event. The soldiers of the German emperor invaded Rome, and in order to show how much the emperor was stronger than the Pope, destroyed Rome, destroyed churches, temples, ruins. They killed a lot of people. But they saved St. Peter's Basilica and the Sistine Chapel. So after 1527, Pope Clement VIII, who saved his life by closing himself inside St. Angel Castle, decided that he had to thank God for the luckiness and the salvation that he had after the sack of Rome. This is how we would call this invasion. So he decides to ask Michelangelo to paint a universal judgment. Now, little information, which is for scholars, let's say. Usually, the final judgments were painted in the churches, in Christian churches, right behind the door, the door, so the entrance. So you have the entrance, and when you enter, behind you, you have the universal judgment. Why? Because when a Christian would attend the service, and at the end of the service would turn and exit and get out of the church, he or she would see the universal judgment, and he would remember its destiny if it doesn't behave or she doesn't behave well during the daily life. So remember that Jesus will come the last day for your final judgment, and you will be either saved or condemned to evil. In the Sistine Chapel, it's the other way around. The universal judgment is painted behind the main altar. So you enter and you see it in front of you. This is how it looked, that wall, before Michelangelo painted this. There were other two scenes painted by Perugino. There was a Virgin Mary, an ascension of the Virgin Mary down below. There were other prophets and sibyls up there. Michelangelo removed all of these paintings. I mean, today, if we think of removing something historical, well, we think that it is a scandal. That age was not like that. For centuries, Italy and Europe had been progressive countries, progressive civilizations, okay? Always renewing. In this case, he removed these paintings in order to renew that wall and paint the universal judgment. Now, how does it work? I'm gonna take some more minutes than the hour. The hour is now. I'm gonna take another 5-10 minutes. Okay, sorry. At the very center, you've got Jesus. Jesus arrives, and with his arms and hands, judges us. So with the right hand, maybe I should do like this. He's pushing up the good souls, the souls of the good ones that are getting back to life below there, so coming out of their tombs, and ascending because they're light. They don't have the sins that make their body heavy, and the angels lift them up to heaven. On the other hand, on the other side, the other arm pushes the souls down. He pushes the bad ones down to evil, and they're heavy, and they're pulled down by the devils. The Virgin Mary is really shy. He's almost afraid of the strength of the anger of her son, and so just hides herself below the arm of Jesus. Look at this. This is one of the condemned ones. It is the real proof that this soul, this man, just understood how stupid he's been and how bad is his destiny. The drama, the sufferance, the impossibility to go back to our mistakes in order to amend them. Michelangelo is a great psychologist. It's not just the power of the body that he paints, but the expression, the eyes. These videos, since it is impossible for me to describe over 300 figures. This is the number of the figures painted by Michelangelo on that wall. Over 300. Each of them, as you can see, has been painted in such a commendable way with so many details, because Michelangelo is almost telling a story in each figure. And there is not one single figure that is not sharing the drama, both in his good destiny and in his bad destiny. that is going on, the drama that is going on in this scene. And this is something that was completely new. All the universal judgment you may see painted before Michelangelo's one would be quite quiet, calm, in order. Look at this, the trumpeters that are announcing the arrival of Jesus. Where you can almost hear the sound of these trumpets because you see the effort of the blowing inside these instruments. And look how all of these figures really flow, fly, and move freely in this image. They are ascending, as you can see. Look at Jesus. Jesus, that is the center, the core of this powerful scene, because it's the core of our destiny. Now, if you look down, look at Jesus. Down to the right-hand side, right down him, there is a bearded figure that is holding, sorry, I don't have the detail of this figure, holding the skin of another figure. That is San Bartholomew, that was martyred while killed by, was unskinned. And the skin is the self-portrait of Michelangelo. So you see, in such a humble way, he signed this masterpiece with this skin. Now, right after the unveiling of this masterpiece, Michelangelo was really bad reviewed, let's say. So much bad reviewed that after a few years, Michelangelo was still alive, so he knew about this. The cardinals decided to cover the genitals of many of the figures painted there. And all of these pieces of clothes that you see on the genitals and on the bottoms of these figures were painted by Daniele da Volterra. Daniele da Volterra was ironically one of the main collaborators of Michelangelo. He had to overpaint what he had contributed to paint because he joined the building site of the Universal Judgment. Most of these veils were removed by Gianluigi Coralucci in the restoration that he made in the late 90s. 1998 was unveiled. But there are some details in which the intervention of the restorers could not do anything. In this case, in the right-hand side, you have the figures of this naked woman is Saint Catherine of Alexandria. And the man that you have on top with this combs, we could say the combs on the hands, is San Biagio. So this is how it looked on the right-hand side of the screen, how Michelangelo painted them. And this is how it looked after the intervention of Daniele da Volterra. Daniele da Volterra just like went with a hammer. He scratched out the colors and repainted totally these two bodies. So the work of Michelangelo was not anymore. Daniele da Volterra dressed up the St. Catherine of Alexandria and turned the head of San Biagio towards Jesus, because they thought in the previous image that he was about to jump on St. Catherine of Alexandria. It was too much of a sexual image that they could not accept, but nothing could be done. And here you have one of the ugliest figures of the Universal Judgment. Let me go back to the total image. The image I just showed you is down below, or down to the right-hand side of the figure where Evil is, okay? This figure is at the entrance of Evil. Sorry, I'm going backwards. And is Minos. Minos is the one that counts how many layers a damned soul had to go down underground while it enters the Evil. And this guy has got a face that is quite precise. It's not just a casual face. while Michelangelo was working on the Universal Judgment, he was not like the previous time. He was accepting visits. The Pope, Paul III Farnese, was going often to chat with him. Some days he was going with his secretary, Biagio da Cesena. One day he asked Biagio da Cesena, Biagio, what do you think about these figures, about the job of Michelangelo? And Biagio says, you know what, Pope? I think that these figures are not even acceptable for a public bathroom, for a stufa. So I would say, I really think they're ugly. All these naked bodies, all these strong expressions, they are not meant to stay, to be seen in a church, but in the ugliest place ever. Michelangelo heard. And as we say in Italy, he tied this on his finger. He made a knot on his finger. And when he had to paint Minos, he gave to Minos the face of Biagio da Cesena. So think, the Christmas Eve of 1545, during the celebration that would have unveiled the Universal Judgment, with all the cardinals, all the ambassadors, all we say in la crème de la crème della society, Roman society, of the Roman society, when they unveiled the Universal Judgment, Biagio da Cesena saw himself as Minos in the entrance of the Evil, the revenge of Michelangelo. Michelangelo was able to take his revenges, waiting the right time to get them. And in this case, he really managed, he really achieved his purpose. Another 2 minutes. Look at Gianluigi Colalucci, that shows us how he would work on the restoration. So almost 20 years after restoring the vault, he's appointed again for restoring the Universal Judgment. Here he's pointing out the addition, not by Michelangelo, but by the restorers. These are the additions. Look, and he also pointing out, of course, the cloth I told you about. All these additions will be the parts, the details that he will remove during the restorations. And now he's going to start making the actual restoration using the technique I told you about. So first, a first passage on the figure with the sponge with water, pure water. In Italian, we say acqua distillata, distilled water. Anyway, the purest water you may use, the one we use to iron cloth, okay? This is just to remove powder, the powders that had been added by time. Now, I just want to add one detail. Michelangelo knew about the danger of the powder. So when he actually built a new wall for Universal Judgment, he made it lean in a little bit, in order to powder not to stay on the wall. But of course, powder, in any case, goes on the wall. So first intervention, remove the dust, not the powder, sorry, the dust, just the dust. In here, he's removing the first, is adding some ingredients that will melt all the fat part that had been added, all the varnish that had been added in the centuries. Then he adds, this is Japanese paper. With the water, he just attaches, glues this paper on the figure that had been previously covered with this ingredient that will melt, that will remove the fat part, all the colors that are not been made, has not been made by Michelangelo. After 12 minutes, they remove all of this paper. So they remove the paper, and already you may see that it is a bit brighter. But now, see, again, with another solution, he starts removing the bad color. Look how the colors come out. Look how clear it becomes. All of the additions set during the centuries are coming out, have been removed. He makes this job twice, and only twice, not more, because if he makes it more than twice, he's going to remove the actual colors by Michelangelo, and this is not something that he wants to. This is how he understood that those eyes had been added later, because those eyes came out when he started removing these additions. And this is how simply this restoration has been made. And think of me, nobody has, I mean, few people have seen these images that I'm showing you. These are the real secrets of the restorations that was made by removing and going back to the roots of this masterpiece, going back to the job of Michelangelo, the original one. This is how we manage to preserve this masterpiece. Just going back and taking out the addition. Now, if you have the chance to go back to the Sistine Chapel, or to go for the first time to the Sistine Chapel, and I hope this virus will allow us as fast, as quick as we can to travel again, you have to see, get up the head of Jesus. There is a little rectangle that is dark. And also on the right-hand side of your screen, upright, there is another rectangle that are darker. These are the parts that Gianluigi Colalucci left to the situation before the restoration. Okay? So this is how they wanted to prove how much clever they were and how much strong they were to go back to the colors. Most of these colors are blue, because the blue is the color of God, is the color that represents God. This is what Michelangelo wrote to Vittorio Colonna in his letters. And this is how much we have to look at this masterpiece, not just as a masterpiece of icons, of figures, but as a spiritual masterpiece, where Michelangelo set all of his intellect, soul, and technique and art. Thank you very much for listening. Now, it's time for Q&A. I hope you enjoyed. It was a very quick, run inside the Sistine Chapel. But I've seen some information. William, Bob, you are with us. I'm so happy. Sorry, I didn't notice you were with us. Let me really salute and hug William Miko that joined us online. And I'm really, I hope to meet you and talk to you quite soon, my dear Miko. So he asks, how much say did the Pope have in the choice of imagery devised by Michelangelo for the Sistine Chapel? So how much the Pope really gave to how much he joined and had part, if I understood well, in the choices of the subjects and the images. Well, William, I have to say almost nothing. Michelangelo was really free of choosing. Well, he was not free of choosing the subjects. Of course, the subjects. So here we put Noah, here we put the creation, here we put the Sibyls, and whatever was not just decided by Michelangelo only, but it was decided by Michelangelo and other intellectuals like Tommaso Inghirami, or other figures that we'll speak about when we're going to talk about Raphael in the next lecture. But the imagery, so the actual figures and poses and the images, no, they were all decided by Michelangelo himself. They would have never accepted any like intervention by the Pope. Raniero Civello, was the Belvedere torso Michelangelo's inspiration for the creation of his statues? Yes and no. Torso del Belvedere, you remember, was the fragmented piece I showed you before. Well, I have to say that he was more inspiring for those paintings. It was part, but you have to think that the slaves, he had already made some of the slaves before discovering the torso. But of course, he basically made it clearer, or even confirmed his theory. Yes, then there was, if there are other questions, I would love to have them now, because we have not so many more minutes. Yes. William, I think I answered your question, no? Maybe I didn't. Okay. The Revenge of Michelangelo is very funny. There is another question. But what is very interesting is that he was preserved, not biblical, is it? I'm glad it was preserved. Of course. Well, you're right. You're right. Even the details that were not really biblical have been preserved. First of all, because and you know, later on there were popes that every now and then was always proposing to destroy the universal judgment. So it's been in danger many times during his history. But the idea of keeping even what was not biblical, so was not coming out of the Bible, it's that in that age they really wanted to merge the Christian culture and the pagan one. They really wanted to, since the pagan culture was so seducing and also so common and shared, that they really wanted it to be merged with the Christian one in order to make it more powerful and more, even because they didn't want to remove what was pagan. I mean, the anger against the pagan images, it's something that came out later, but not in the 1500s. It came out with the Reformation right after, at the end of the century. But at that age, it was quite in peace. Paganism and Christianism were quite in peace. Sabrina, I know you're there. Is there any question from the assembly, from those that attended the lecture physically? I would be glad to answer them.
Yes, we have some questions from the room, and they will ask you.
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm just looking at how everything you've explained is centered. I speak up. Hello, I hope you can hear me. Yeah, I was appreciating how much of the work is centered around the Christian faith, and I'm trying to understand and perhaps appreciate how religion has a role to play in the creation of this work, and also maybe how it survived all these centuries. We know that Christianity had a central role to play, but I want to imagine society will not forever be Christian based in that particular country and in the world at large. Christianity will not forever be a dominant religion. So how then does that piece of work continue to be preserved despite its huge attachment to religion? Thank you.
Thank you for this question. Religion, of course, played a central role. Michelangelo, and I have to say all of the artists that we still remember about, had a very, very deep religious sense. They were not, of course, monks, but they were quite informed, and they were living their own religious experience. And Michelangelo was really living the relationship with God as a fight. He was living it as a dramatic experience. He was living the limit of the human being compared to the like God dimension. He was always thinking that getting close to God would be a very difficult achievement for a human being, and nevertheless was the only achievement to be followed. He was not a common Christian. At a certain point of his life, he got close to Vittoria Colonna, who had founded a group of intellectuals with even some cardinals that was trying to find a way to get a link with the Protestant religion. You know that these years were those in which the Reform would start. In 1517, Martin Luther would add on the door of the cathedral of Cologne the 90 Theses, against the Roman Church. And Michelangelo was really feeling that the Reformation was not so bad, that that's why he gave to human being such a strong role in those paintings. This is why the Final Judgment is not a way to celebrate God and Jesus, but it's to celebrate the destiny of the human beings, because he felt quite interested in the human experience of God. And that's why he got so criticized, because people would think that it was closer to the Reformed Church than to the Catholic one. So religion was central. But then, when you say that Christian religion had not been always central and present in Rome, unfortunately, I have to say that it is not right. Rome, it's always been governed, controlled, and preserved by Christian religion. Of course, you have to think, and this is just the proof of how much these masterpieces went beyond the religious meaning, and they become a universal heritage, going even beyond the religious meaning. If I say that the Vatican City was not bombed during World War II, Rome was bombed. Rome was hit by bombs, but not in the historical center and not in the Vatican City, because there was kind of an agreement, a worldwide agreement, that those were masterpieces that would belong to everybody, the Muslims, the Protestants, the Baptists, every single, the Zarathustrian, or the, I don't know what, say me, tell me about the religion, and they will all agree that Michelangelo's masterpieces would go much beyond. And that's why we don't ask what's your religion when you enter the Sistine Chapel. It's open to everybody, because Michelangelo made it that way.
Good afternoon, Professor. Or, as we say in Friuli, Mandi. I regret I missed the session on Leonardo. I would have liked to have attended that one. And I hope that you have in your schedule, I hope you'll have something on the other Michelangelo Merisi, Caravaggio.
I hope so. I mean, I wrote a couple of books about my Caravaggio, so we'll see if there's a chance to speak about him.
Good. My question is the belly button.
Yeah.
Did Adam have a belly button when he was created? And did they have a belly button, he and Eve, did they have a belly button when they were chased from the Garden of Eden?
Yeah. Let's go back to the image. This is a funny question that sometimes I receive, I have to say. Well, you're right. You're right. Let me share. Hold on. Okay. Oh, I want to share, but here it does not allow me to share it. Let's go like this. Sorry, okay, just want to. Oh, okay, I cannot share it again. Okay, you are right. You are right. There's a. It's a kind of mistake. You're right. We've been saying that Michelangelo has been so accurate in depicting these figures, but of course, he was informed about human anatomy. Maybe he was not so informed about how a child is born. I don't know, but anyway, yeah, you can say it's a mistake. Maybe it's a mistake, but of course it makes all of these figures much more human because this is what he wanted to say. They were humans. They were not just creation of God, spiritual creations.
Okay, thank you.
You're right. You noticed something right. I mean, it's something that he didn't think too much about.
Thank you very much for the amazing presentation. Really appreciate it. One thing I want to ask is Michelangelo, the most famous painting of him is in the Vatican City, in the chapel, the Last Judgment. But my question is, did he ever do other paintings elsewhere apart from Italy? Or was he just based in Italy? That's where all the paintings he did. Or maybe he went out and did other paintings that were not really religious, but also just his own work. Thank you.
Okay. If the technician allows me to share again, okay, here, okay, good. I'm gonna show you, because I just showed you quickly before, the only, let's say, basically it's the only other painting that Michelangelo made. Is this one here. He, as I told you, it was a sculpture. So he made many drawings. And the other painting that he surely made is this one here. It's the Holy Family. So you see that the Virgin Mary that is taking the baby Jesus from behind, from the arms of Joseph. And there are other nudes in the back that has still a very enigmatic meaning. And it's tondo, so it's a round painting that he painted before the Sistine Chapel. But immediately you can see, can understand now how much this figure inspired him, the Sibyls, for example, or the colors of the Sistine Chapel. Michelangelo worked only in Italy. He didn't like to travel that much. He was quite loving to stay, so he worked basically in Florence, in Rome, and some of his pieces now are not only there. We have even in Milan or around Rome, but he basically was always attached to these two cities, Florence and Rome. And in terms of painting, he didn't like painting that much, and he was not requested to make painting. So this, the Tondo Doni, is the only other, let's say, big, strong painting that he made, apart from many drawings that he was using a lot as studios for his sculptures. I have time for another 2 questions. I'm sorry.
Thank you for this wonderful lecture, Professor. My question is, I've seen that Michelangelo was some kind of obsessed with the human brain. Just on the painting of God creating Adam. During my research, I found that also on the neck, is it the Adam's apple of God? There is also some kind of the brain, the anatomy of a brain. Is he trying to tell us something more than just to say creation was an idea? Because if you take me back to the picture.
Yeah, this is
creation
what
of Adam.
Yeah, hold on. Hold on, share screen here.
Yes, then is if you can enlarge the neck part where the beard and the neck of God there.
Oh, I cannot enlarge, I'm sorry. This is not what Zoom does not allow to enlarge, unfortunately.
Okay, okay. Yes, there seems to be the brain again. There seems to be the brain there.
Yeah.
During my research, I found that one. So I was thinking.
Okay, let's say something. I mean, Michelangelo liked to hide secret messages in his paintings, okay? I would actually doubt a little bit that in such a small detail, he would set another, like iconography or another image, because it would have been quite hard to distinguish it from the floor, okay? So while the cloth is quite big and you can see this shape from below, in a very small detail, it would have been harder. But anyway, we cannot say no. What I want to add to the explanation I told you before is that Michelangelo somehow anticipated what we today consider conceptual art, because he was saying that art is first a question of ideas, and then later on it becomes a question of hands. Because in a sonnet, in a poem he wrote, he said, the idea comes to the mind, and then the mind leads the hand and make the hand create the image, which is something quite new, because the artists before Leonardo and Michelangelo were considered artisans, so clever users of hands. In this case, for the first time, the intellect, the mind, became central in the conception of any art piece. And you're right when you say he was obsessed by that, because he was always reaffirming this concept.
I had two questions. You have actually answered the other one again.
Is there somebody else? Okay. Anyway, I just want to tell you, if you have more questions, you can leave them to Sabrina. She's gonna write to me by email this question, and we will share the answers somehow. If you leave your email address, I will be glad. So, sorry. Okay.
Good afternoon, Professor. Thank you for this lesson. We really enjoyed it. My question is based on the picture from the Garden of Eden, where the snake comes to tempt Eve. Yes, that picture. I remember you mentioned that the snake was in form of a woman. I just wanted you to clarify that. Was it a human form? Because I can see the tail of the snake and then the human, the female human figure at the top there. So was the snake in human form? Something like, let's say, Medusa, where it's human on one part and the snake on the other part, or I just wanted to get it crazy or not.
Okay, so as you can see, there is a shape that is revolving around the trunk, right in the center of the scene, okay? So this revolving element is the snake, is the body of the snake, because the Bible says, in the Genesis, the Bible says that the devil turned himself into a snake in order to seduce and persuade Eve to take the apple. In this case, the upper part of the body is a woman. So it means that this snake was a woman, was a she snake, let's say. This is the idea of Michelangelo, where Michelangelo actually recalls a tradition, a classical tradition. It is not the only snake, woman snake, that is represented in an image of the original scene. There was a kind of a tradition because, unfortunately, the church for a long time was being against women. Women were considered the weak gender. So, I mean, we know it's a mistake, but this is how they were thinking at the time. And on top of that, some critics wanted to add the information that Michelangelo was against women, that he never got married. He had maybe a latent homosexuality. He fell in love with this young architect at the end of his life. He was called Tommaso de' Cavalieri. And they would use this choice and say, you know, this proves how much hate he had against women, because he considers them as the devil. Another information I want to add, as you can see, the tree, it is not an apple tree. It's a fig tree. Because in the Bible, they say, they get an apple, and then they cover, when they discover, after eating the apple, Adam and Eve discover that they are naked, and so they cover their genitals with a fig leaf. So where did this fig leaf come from? Michelangelo thinks it came from the tree they used to take the fruit from. And so that's why it's a fig tree and not an apple tree.
Okay.
I hope I say it clear enough. I said it clear enough. Okay, thank you very much. Really, thank you. I'm sorry if there were more questions that I could not answer. So Sabrina, please help me and take notes of the questions and the email addresses, and I will be glad to answer them quickly in the next hours.
Yes, I've already collected all the emails of the participants. I'm happy for that. Thank you very much, Professor Costantino, for this fantastic lecture. Most of our audience comes from UNZA, from the Fine Arts University.
Great.
So I think. So
I hope they appreciated even the technical explanation, no? Speaking about the restoration, not just ideas.
Some of you probably, they met you last time when you came here, and I want to give the appointment already for the next lesson on Raffaello on beginning of December, but I will circulate the information.
Okay, okay. Thank you again, everybody.
For all participants, also online, and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.